In this video lesson, we will have the highlights on the important historical events on the formation of physiological psychology. 1 million years ago, man valued brain and knew that injury to it caused death. The first brain surgery, or trepanation, took place around 7000 BCE during the Neolithic times. Ancient Chinese. In 2700 BCE, Shen Nung originated acupuncture based on yin-yang philosophy. Acupuncture was derived from Taoist tradition that were even older, 8,000 years. Ancient Egyptian, called the Edwin Smith surgical papyrus. They were first written account of brain in 1700 BCE based on text that was 3000 BCE old. This account describes 28 cases of brain, skull, and spinal injuries. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, studied brain-injured patients, the gladiators, and noted that brain was the seat of our joys, pleasure, sorrows, and others, and our sensations and intelligence. The Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle. Plato correctly identified mind in the brain. However, his student Aristotle believed that mind was in the heart. Brain to him was merely a radiator to cool the blood. Roman physician Galen, a prominent Roman surgeon, agreed with Hippocrates on brain as the seat of mind, carried out dissections, and found cerebrum to be soft and cerebellum hard. Also discovered fluid-filled ventricles, which he thought the cerebrospinal fluid was used to communicate. Ibn Zakaria al-Razi, or Razes, a Persian physician, criticized Galen on his mind-bodily humors, describes 7 cranial nerves and 31 spinal nerves. Al-Haytum or Al-Hazen wrote a 7-volume book on optics called Kitab al-Manazir, correctly identified light as an external source for vision and dispelled Empedocle's idea of visual ray. Al-Zahrawi, Abul Qasis, an Arab surgeon from Spain, described several surgical treatments for neurological disorders. He wrote Kitab al-Tarsib, a 30-volume encyclopedia on medical practices. Ibn-i-Sina, also known as Avicenna, also called the Prince of Medicine, wrote Al-Canon fil Tibb, the Canon of Medicine. In the text, he talked about perception, imagination, and generation of ideas. Rene Descartes. Like Plato, he believed that mind possessed innate ideas and proposed mind-body dualism, interacting at the pineal gland. Descartes described reflex action as a basis of understanding behavior from a neuroscientific view. Galvani and Boyce-Raymond showed that electrical current would twitch muscles and brain-generated electricity. Bell and Magendie showed spinal roots carried messages in different directions. Muller proposed that the nature of sensation depends on sensory fibers, stimulated not on how fibers are stimulated. His student Helmholtz measured the speed of nerve conduction. Camillo Golgi believed that neurons connected in a syncytium, connecting by blending. Ramon E. Cajal believed that neurons are separate and communicate through gaps. This came to be known as the Neuron Doctrine. Sir Charles Sherrington studied reflex action on dogs. Based on his behavioral experiments, he inferred about synaptic transmission, named the gap Cajal pointed out as the synapse. Florence conducted many brain ablation experiments and found that cerebellum played an important role in coordinated movements. Franz Gall studied skull bumps and proposed modularity of brain. Different parts of brain perform different functions. Paul Broca studied patient Tan after his death and found an area in the brain that was involved with speech production. Carl Berninkel, just as Broca had shown speech production area in the brain, Berninkel identified speech comprehension area. Corbinian-Brodmann divided the brain into many distinct areas or regions and delineated their role in behavioral function. Shepard-Franz were critics of localization of the function of the brain. Carl Lashley showed that a number of behavior like learning and memory were not localized in particular regions of the brain. James Ald's electrical stimulation of the brain evokes emotional responses in animals. The reward center in the brain. Wilder Penfield, a Canadian neurosurgeon, electrically stimulated human brain to localize epileptic palsy. Stimulation of specific areas of the brain evoke specific memories. Describe sensory and motor cortex in the human brain. Roger Sperry carried experiment to discover left and right brain hemisphere specialization. Michael Gazzaniga, a Sperry student, conduct research on how the brain enables mind. Mortimer Mishkin, a neurobiological mechanism underlying learning and memory in primates. Brain lesions, specially designed to study behavior, learning, and cognitive memory tasks. Finally, Christopher Koch, promoting the study of consciousness through the use of modern tools of his neurobiology. His primary collaborator in this endeavor was the late Francis Crick, who was one of the scientists who discovered the DNA.